In your latest post on the pipeline, you backed away from the details of this argument, and you really made a prime point about the issue here. The subtext behind the environmental arguments, for sure, is oil demand overall, not this pipeline specifically.
If you block the pipeline but don't get oil demand under control or get on top of other greenhouse gas emissions, you're in deep trouble on climate change anyhow. If you permit the pipeline but get oil demand under control and deal with your other emissions, then the fact that the pipeline exists will be largely immaterial when it comes to climate change. So I generally see this as something of a distraction. The goal of climate policy should be to reduce demand for fossil fuels, and if we do that, the oil sands will become superfluous.
Well, and in a sense, they're a proxy for all kinds of energy that's hard, sources of fuel that are hard to get and costly to get. They go away if demand goes down, or if the price drops, which is sort of like
the two go together.
Yeah.
And they're a proxy not only in an analytical sense, but clearly in a symbolic and political sense. And a lot of what's being talked about right now really is about symbolism and about politics, not necessarily in a bad sense, but in the sense that a lot of people are looking at this as a signal.
Yeah, and this gets us back, circles us back to this prime question, which is this in the national interest? And again, there are layers to that question. And I asked you in an email overnight, whether you could stake your own position on that toughest of all questions.
Right. Look, it's a tough decision because you have conflicting priorities. At the same time, it's one where there aren't overwhelming arguments on either side. This is not a climate catastrophe, but it's not some sort of energy security panacea where we'll be able to decouple from the Middle East if this pipeline is built. Ultimately, I tend to see this as being in the national interest so long as proper and local environmental protections are put in place within the United States. What happens in Alberta is the business of the Albertan and Canadian governments. And then it comes down to this balance between greenhouse gas emissions, marginal additional greenhouse gas emissions, and the economic benefits, frankly. It's not really a security benefit in a technical sense. It's an economic benefit of being able to develop this oil. And if you take a look, blocking it would increase oil prices, not just on the oil from Canada, but on all the oil that the United States consumes. But it would also marginally reduce greenhouse gas emissions. If you run the numbers, it turns out to be an extremely expensive way to cut greenhouse gas emissions. I prefer that we focus on areas where we can get purchase on a much larger set of emissions at a much more reasonable cost.
If Obama rejects it, it makes his political task of getting reelected that much harder, I think. And so if you're an environmentalist, how much do you care about that meta kind of interest question versus your real-term CO2 pipeline risk question? And it's kind of an interesting one.
I think you would care a lot, but I don't think you even need to go that far to see the politics of this in a useful way. The president has tried to promote his energy policy as being one that integrates economics, climate, and security. And if people intuitively see lower world oil prices and access to oil as being part of what they think of as a good energy policy, and the president says, well, you've got to pick that or climate becomes all that much more difficult to sell. If he's able to say, and I think he can honestly say, that you can do this and also be serious about climate change, it puts climate in a better context. Now, look, is this what's going to determine whether he succeeds or fails on climate change? Absolutely not. He's had an awfully tough time moving forward on climate change. But I can't imagine that blocking this pipeline will help him in trying to ultimately move on policies that actually have big impacts on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And there's a lot of muddle and confusion here. I can't help but observing that Bill McKibben, who's leading the protests against the pipeline, opposed the Waxman-Markey cap and trade bill, which would have had much greater impacts on greenhouse gas emissions than blocking this pipeline would.